Have you ever wondered why some homes feel instantly alive and others feel strangely stuck? No matter how beautiful they are, it's not about money, it's not about furniture, it's about energy. And sometimes what decides the entire flow of a home is something as simple, as overlooked, as a single living plant. In Feng Shui, plants are more than decorations. They are the carriers of life force qi that either nourishes or depletes a space. And among all plants, the pothos is one of the most powerful. It grows fast, it adapts, it survives almost anywhere. But its true magic doesn't happen just by owning it. It happens by where you place it. If positioned with intention, a pothos can invite wealth, opportunity, and stability into your life. If neglected or misplaced, it can quietly anchor stagnation, confusion, and missed chances without you even realizing it. Today, we're diving into 5 of the best places to position your pothos to supercharge abundance, and 3 common mistakes you must avoid if you want energy, health, and fortune to flow freely through your home. Before we begin, if this perspective already feels refreshing, if you are someone who senses the subtle ways a home can either lift or weigh you down, I invite you to help me continue this journey. A like, a share, or a subscribe to New Day Mindfulness helps me reach 1,000 followers and keeps these grounded, practical Feng Shui teachings growing, one peaceful home at a time. Now let's step inside the hidden world of placement, energy, and living fortune. Why plants matter in Feng Shui. In the quiet traditions of Feng Shui, there is a truth so simple that most people overlook it. Life responds to life. And in the architecture of energy, few expressions of life are as vital or as revealing as plants. A healthy, thriving plant is not just something beautiful to look at. It is a breathing signal to the universe that your home is a place where growth is welcome, where new beginnings are nurtured, where energy does not get stuck, but stretches, expands, and moves upward the way all living things are designed to. Plants embody the wood element, the pulse of springtime, the force of renewal, the silent courage it takes for a seed to push upward against the heavy pull of gravity, seeking the sun even when the soil above it feels impossibly thick. In the 5 elements theory of Feng Shui, wood is what drives us to move forward, to climb higher, to reach toward the dreams we carry but cannot yet see. Without wood, spaces grow dull, heavy, inert. With too much, they become chaotic, overwhelmed. But when balanced, when carefully guided, the wood energy in a home teaches every other element how to find its rightful rhythm. This is why plants matter, not because they look nice, not because they fill an empty corner, but because they become teachers for the energy around them. They hold the memory of upward motion. They hold the pattern of resilience. They hold the story of what it means to be flexible without breaking, to be rooted without being trapped, to be growing without rushing. A pothos plant in particular carries these lessons in its very structure. Its vines are soft yet persistent, stretching across surfaces gently, never violently. Its leaves unfold steadily, not in bursts, but in calm, assured increments. It teaches a space how to breathe in patience, how to exhale resistance, how to move with steady, sustainable ambition, the kind that leads not just to temporary success, but to enduring wealth, health, and peace. But here lies the deeper, often misunderstood part of the teaching. Presence alone is not enough. In Feng Shui, energy does not respond merely to what you own. It responds to how you place it, how you honor it, how you allow it to participate in the invisible conversation that your home is having with the universe at every moment. Placement is not decoration, it is communication. When you place a pothos carelessly, where it struggles for light, where it is forgotten behind furniture, where it absorbs the heavy residue of stagnant or clashing elements, you are not inviting growth. You are unintentionally teaching your home that life is neglected, that fortune is obstructed, that opportunity is allowed to wither without notice. Where you position your pothos decides whether it will act as a magnet or a mute witness. Placed near the entrance, it becomes a vibrant greeter, signaling to incoming energy that this is a home where life is respected and opportunities are welcomed with open arms. Placed in the southeast, the traditional wealth sector, it feeds and amplifies the energy of sustained prosperity. nourishing both the tangible and intangible forms of abundance. Positioned thoughtfully in a living room, it softens sharp edges, dissolves tension, and keeps the energy of relationships, both personal and professional, circulating fluidly rather than becoming blocked or brittle. Set beside a work desk, it supports clarity, patience, and inspired action, the quiet ingredients behind every significant achievement. But misplaced, too close to clashing elements like fire in the kitchen, or compressed into spaces where chi cannot breathe, a pothos cannot fulfill its role as a harmonizer. Instead of reinforcing vitality, it begins to echo struggle, subtly tying the room and the person living within it into patterns of resistance, fatigue, or missed opportunities. This is why in Feng Shui practice, observing the health of your plants becomes a kind of diagnostic tool. Are the leaves vibrant, stretching outward with confidence? Or are they drooping, curling, yellowing at the edges? Are the vines weaving across spaces naturally? Or are they tangled, trapped, or broken? These are not just signs of botanical health. They are reflections of the energy fields they inhabit. When a pothos plant struggles despite good water, light, and soil, the environment itself is likely the issue, not the plant. And by extension, the person living in that environment is likely wrestling with similar invisible struggles. The dream that won't take root, the opportunities that wilt at the edges, the relationships that lose their vitality. Placement, therefore, is sacred work. It asks us not just to decorate, but to listen, to see what a space needs more of, or less of. To place a living being like a pothos, not where it looks best to the eye, but where it feels best to the heart, where it can do what it was born to do: grow, stretch, climb, thrive, and teach the space around it to do the same. Energy follows form, and form, when shaped with intention, becomes a map, not just of a home, but of a life. Every room is a field. Every object is a participant. Every choice we make, conscious or unconscious, leaves a fingerprint on the way energy flows, builds, gathers, or disperses. And the pothos, humble as it may seem, holds the extraordinary ability to tilt that flow toward abundance when given the chance. So as you prepare to position your pothos or reposition it, remember this: you are not just placing a plant. You are writing a message to the energy field you live inside every day. You are telling it, quietly but clearly, whether you believe in your own right to grow, to reach, to prosper without force or struggle. Choose wisely, place with care, and watch not only your plant, but your life begin to climb toward the light. The 5 most auspicious places to position your pothos. 1. Or the front door. In the philosophy of Feng Shui, the front door is never just an architectural feature. It is the mouth of Qi, the entry point where external energy, opportunities, and life force first encounter your personal domain. It's the handshake your home extends to the universe, and just like a human handshake, it communicates everything. Welcome or warning, vitality or exhaustion, readiness or resistance. What stands by your front door, therefore, matters deeply. It either invites fortune in with open arms, or inadvertently signals that prosperity should hesitate at the threshold. This is why positioning a thriving pothos plant near the entrance is one of the most profound yet underused Feng Shui adjustments you can make. The pothos, with its flowing vines and resilient spirit, mirrors the energy you wish to cultivate: steady growth, adaptable strength, and a welcoming, open-hearted space. When placed near the front door, a pothos acts as a living greeter, softening harsh incoming energies, buffering the household from chaotic external forces, and magnetizing opportunities rather than letting them glance off unnoticed. However, intention and precision in placement are critical. To fully activate its energy, the pothos should be placed on the left-hand side as you look outward from within the home. In classical Feng Shui, the left side represents the green dragon, an ancient symbol of protection, vitality, and ascending fortune. The green dragon is powerful but benevolent, governing growth, career advancement, and upward movement in life. By aligning your pothos with this symbolic guardian, you empower it to strengthen not only the chi entering your home, but also the stability of your endeavors, making sure that whatever good fortune reaches your doorstep has a chance to root deeply and flourish, rather than drift away. The plant itself becomes a signal, a beacon quietly telling the universe, here growth is welcome, here new beginnings are cared for. Yet as always, carelessness in application can dull the effect. The pothos should not block the door, constricting the flow of movement. It should not be left to wither under harsh direct sunlight or allowed to grow tangled and messy in the doorway, sending mixed messages about disorder or neglect. Instead, it must be vibrant, alive, and thoughtfully tended, a living expression of readiness for the prosperity you wish to invite. The pot you choose matters too. Earthenware or ceramic pots in natural tones like green, brown, or soft gold help stabilize the plant's wood energy and harmonize with the elemental balance of the entrance, which ideally combines earth and wood to anchor new energy before it moves deeper into the house. To see this principle in action, let's consider a small family business tucked away on a quiet side street. For years, despite warm service, thoughtful products, and fair prices, foot traffic remained inconsistent. Customers often praised the store but rarely returned. The owners, feeling puzzled, consulted a Feng Shui advisor who immediately noticed one key issue: a harsh, barren stretch of concrete outside the entrance and an empty, almost clinical feeling at the front door. No vitality, no invitation. On the advisor's recommendation, they placed a large, healthy pothos to the left of the entrance door, allowing its soft, trailing vines to frame the threshold without blocking it. They chose a rich green ceramic pot to anchor the plant's energy and placed a smooth river stone at its base to reinforce groundedness. Within weeks, without changing marketing, signage, or product offerings, the owners noticed a tangible shift. Customers lingered longer. Conversations flowed more easily. Repeat visitors became common, sales began to stabilize, and new faces started appearing who said they simply felt drawn to come inside. The change was not in the inventory, it was in the energy at the threshold. The silent handshake had been transformed from hesitant to magnetic, and life responded. The lesson here is subtle but unshakable. Life moves where life is welcomed. Prosperity enters where prosperity is prepared for. In Feng Shui, nothing is left to chance because energy itself is not random. It follows the patterns we create, whether through carelessness or through mindful design. A pothos near the front door is not a magic charm. It is a living signal that your space is aligned, that your intentions are coherent, that your home is actively asking for and capable of holding the blessings it receives. The plant's condition over time will also reflect back to you the truth of your space. If it thrives, it confirms that the entrance is nourishing, vibrant, and correctly positioned to receive qi. If it struggles, it offers a gentle warning to reassess, perhaps clearing clutter, rebalancing elements, or even adjusting the plant's placement slightly to reattune the flow. Remember, qi is not a force you can force. It's a current you learn to collaborate with, a stream you learn to guide without domination. When your pothos near the front door is thriving, it becomes a daily visual prayer, a whisper each time you pass through that says, growth is possible here, fortune can land here, life finds a home here. And from that simple, natural, undeniable truth, everything else can begin to grow outward, just as surely as a vine reaches for the light. 2. Southeast corner of the home. In the classical map of Feng Shui, few areas are more revered or more delicately powerful than the southeast corner of a home. Traditionally known as the wealth sector, this zone governs not just visible finances, but the deeper patterns of how abundance enters, grows, and sustains itself across time. It is the space of accumulated blessings, of stability and resources, of ongoing nourishment that doesn't arrive in sharp bursts only to vanish again, but flows like a dependable river, feeding every other aspect of a life well lived. To strengthen this sector is to tell the energy of the universe, I am ready not just for fortune to find me, but for fortune to stay, deepen, and mature within my life. This is why placing a pothos in the southeast is not merely a decorative act. It is a profound energetic investment. The pothos, with its evergreen leaves and relentless adaptability, mirrors exactly the kind of qualities that the wealth sector needs to thrive. endurance, flexibility, health, quiet upward motion, and a continuous weaving of life force into every fiber of space. When a vibrant pothos is placed intentionally in the southeast, it acts as a living amplifier for wealth energy. Its constant, graceful growth feeds the wood element naturally associated with this direction, strengthening the sector's ability to attract and retain abundance. But the potency of this placement is not simply about adding any green thing to the corner and hoping for magic. In Feng Shui, energy is deeply sensitive to the condition of its anchors. A neglected pothos, a plant left dusty with yellowing or browning leaves, an overwatered root ball sagging in heavy trapped soil. These are not neutral mistakes. They are loud, energetic messages telling the space that abundance here is careless, slow to be nurtured, or allowed to decay unnoticed. Conversely, a lush, thriving pothos, one with leaves that gleam under soft light, vines that stretch confidently, roots that drink but do not drown, becomes a magnet, a quiet gravitational pull drawing prosperity, stability, and opportunity toward you like rivers to an open valley. The container you choose matters as much as the plant itself. For southeast placements, pots made of ceramic, terracotta, or even glazed earthenware are ideal, reinforcing the connection to earth and wood elements, which work harmoniously here. Colors should also align thoughtfully. Rich greens deepen the wood energy, soft browns stabilize it. Touches of gentle gold accentuate prosperity without tipping into excess. Avoid harsh, jarring tones like bright reds or stark blacks in this area, as they introduce fire and water conflicts that destabilize the wealth sector's natural rhythm. Keep the surroundings clean, open, and free of clutter. Let light touch the plant daily, but avoid blasting it with harsh, burning rays that could shock the delicate balance of growth. Beyond placement, the attitude with which you interact with this pothos matters. In subtle energy work, objects become alive to the quality of attention they receive. A pothos that is acknowledged, appreciated, gently rotated to ensure even light, watered with consideration rather than rote habit, pruned carefully when needed. This plant does not merely survive, it collaborates. It becomes a living partner in your financial intentions, echoing your readiness to receive with dignity, to grow with steadiness, and to endure with grace. Prosperity in the truest sense is rarely about sudden windfalls or dramatic gestures. It is about the steady, layered, cumulative accumulation of choices, just as a pothos does not produce an entire vine overnight, but unfolds it leaf by leaf, hour by hour, seemingly imperceptibly, until one day a corner that once felt barren is quietly lush, vibrant, and full of life. Consider the story of a woman named Elena, who had struggled for years with financial instability despite working tirelessly and managing her expenses carefully. A Feng Shui consultation revealed that her southeast corner, tucked into a forgotten nook behind heavy curtains and a stack of unopened moving boxes, was effectively blocked. Its energy trapped, muted, unable to reach her living spaces. Following guidance, Elena cleared the space, let light into the corner, and placed a healthy pothos in a deep green ceramic pot at eye level. She tended it weekly, not obsessively but faithfully, ensuring it remained vibrant and adjusting its position slightly with the changing seasons. Within 6 months, without any radical changes to her job or habits, she received a surprising promotion, negotiated a better salary, and found a long-delayed investment opportunity finally falling into place. She described the shift not as a sudden miracle, but as a steady opening, as if the current of her life had simply stopped resisting her efforts and begun to carry her forward more willingly. The lesson here is crucial. Prosperity often isn't about working harder. It is about clearing the invisible blocks that keep effort from translating into results. A thriving pothos in the southeast is not a magical shortcut. It is a daily commitment to showing the universe and yourself that you are cultivating space where abundance can root, grow, and expand naturally. It signals a readiness to tend not just to the dramatic moments of gain, but to the patient rhythms that sustain real wealth over time. When you walk through your home, pause for a moment at your southeast corner. What do you feel? Is it open, light, welcoming? Or is it cramped, dusty, forgotten, heavy? Does the energy of that corner say growth happens here? Or does it whisper life is on pause? Your pothos can help rewrite that message, but only if you give it the conditions it needs to embody the story you want your life to tell. In this way, Feng Shui teaches us a profound truth, that abundance is less about what you chase and more about what you prepare to receive. That growth does not arrive because you strain for it, but because you make a home for it. And that a single living vine, reaching quietly upward toward a patch of sunlight, can carry more wealth wisdom than all the hurried striving in the world. Plant your intentions wisely, tend them patiently, let them rise naturally, and know that prosperity, like a healthy pothos, grows best when rooted in care, steadiness, and trust. 3. Living room. The living room is far more than a space for entertainment or casual gatherings. In Feng Shui, it acts as the heart of the home, the central station where qi circulates, renews itself, and radiates into every other room. It is the energetic distribution hub, and the way energy behaves here sets the emotional and financial tone for the entire household. A vibrant, well-balanced living room ensures that fortune or opportunities and supportive relationships are not just occasional visitors, but consistent, stable residents within your life. This is why the strategic placement of a pothos in the living room carries far more impact than most people realize. Its presence doesn't simply beautify the space. It softens the invisible fractures that form when energy becomes jagged, tense, or stagnant. It absorbs subtle chaos and reweaves it into something smooth, nourishing, and harmonious. In essence, the pothos becomes a living mediator between the diverse energies brought in by family members, guests, conversations, and even silent, accumulated emotions. When considering where to place a pothos in the living room, it is essential to think in terms of flow rather than static placement. The living room should feel breathable, spacious, emotionally accessible, and energetically welcoming. Positioning the pothos near areas where people naturally gather, such as around sofas, low coffee tables, or communal seating nooks, can dramatically elevate the qi quality of the room. If the room contains sharp corners, heavy electronic equipment, or architectural features that cut the space visually, a cascading pothos can soften these aggressive lines, preventing the qi from bouncing harshly and instead encouraging it to meander gently like a river around stones. Ideally, the pothos should be placed at eye level or slightly below, ensuring it becomes a visible part of the home's breathing cycle without overwhelming the space or feeling artificially staged. Attention must also be given to the container and the care of the plant. A pothos languishing in a cracked pot or one with dusty, drooping leaves doesn't merely fail to help. It actively mirrors and amplifies stagnation. Energy reads conditions, not intentions. Therefore, the pot should be in colors that enhance emotional balance. Soft greens to promote tranquility, muted earth tones to reinforce stability, warm wood textures to encourage community connection. Avoid flashy, metallic, or overly cold materials in the living room's wealth energy zone unless deliberately balanced with warm elements. Lighting also matters enormously. A pothos placed in dim, forgotten corners struggles. It needs to reach toward light. By ensuring that it receives a few hours of gentle, natural illumination daily, or at least access to ambient indoor light, you allow the symbolic message of growth and expansion to remain strong and consistent. One poignant example comes from the story of a couple named Thomas and Elaine. Both successful in their careers, they found that despite their achievements, their home life remained curiously strained. Financial arguments arose unexpectedly, family visits often ended awkwardly, and an underlying tension seemed to hover over their evenings without obvious cause. Upon examining their living room through a Feng Shui lens, it became evident that the space, although meticulously designed, lacked life force. Stark furniture, sharp angles, and a cluttered media center dominated the room. On guidance, they introduced two healthy pothos plants into the living space, one flowing gently from a corner shelf to soften harsh architectural lines, and another placed between their main seating area and a large, heavy coffee table to invite better conversational flow. Within weeks, not only did the room feel more inviting, but the couple noticed they quarreled less, found humor in small irritations, and even stumbled upon unexpected freelance opportunities simply by hosting friends more frequently and with greater ease. Their financial stability improved, not because they worked harder, but because they created a space where supportive chi could circulate freely through their home and relationships. It is crucial to understand that prosperity does not only enter through financial transactions. It enters through conversations, collaborations, ideas exchanged during casual moments, emotional restoration that fuels better decisions, the magnetic pull that draws opportunities toward you when your energy field feels coherent and abundant rather than fractured and anxious. The living room is the central amplifier of these dynamics. A pothos thriving in this room is not just a symbol of good fortune, but an active agent, continuously smoothing rough edges, catching and redirecting errant emotional currents, holding open the energetic door for blessings to stay longer, settle deeper, and integrate more fully into the household's life. Energy practices also recommend occasionally rotating the pothos slightly to prevent one side from becoming disproportionately heavy or weakened, a small but powerful ritual gesture that reminds us that balance must be maintained, not assumed. Every few months, gently wiping the leaves with a damp cloth to remove dust serves not only the plant's health, but also symbolizes the clearing away of stagnant layers in household communication and prosperity pathways. These quiet acts of maintenance weave Feng Shui principles directly into daily life, turning what might have been passive decoration into active energy cultivation. Ultimately, the living room teaches a profound energetic truth that what you nurture with presence flourishes. That prosperity isn't chased down in desperate bursts, but grows naturally in environments where life feels unhurried, seen, supported. That conversations, laughter, problem solving, and even shared silences carry the seeds of future wealth, not just in money, but in connection, creativity, and peace of mind. The pothos, humble and steady, models exactly this way of being, climbing slowly but surely, wrapping spaces in green threads of vitality, reminding everyone who passes through that in the right conditions, life chooses to stay, not just visit. Therefore, when you place your pothos in the living room, you are not merely decorating. You are issuing an invitation to prosperity, to harmony, to the kind of wealth that enriches not only the bank account, but the spirit, and that is a fortune truly worth cultivating. 4. Work desk or checkout counter. The workspace, whether it's a formal office, a kitchen desk, or even a humble checkout counter at a small business, represents far more than a functional area for transactions and tasks. In Feng Shui, it is seen as a concentrated altar of purpose, focus, and manifesting power. It is the seat from which intentions become action, ideas become income, and dreams are slowly forged into reality. Just as an altar in a temple is arranged with great care to honor invisible forces, your work desk deserves similar reverence, for it shapes not only how you labor, but how you receive. Every object on and around your desk carries a message about your relationship with work, wealth, and energy. This is where the humble pothos plant becomes an extraordinary ally. Pothos, known for its resilience and gentle upward growth, is the ideal plant to counteract the energy disturbances created by electronics, computers, monitors, smartphones, Wi-Fi routers, all of which, while necessary, generate energetic fields that can fragment concentration, escalate nervous tension, and subtly drain the focus required to do deep, meaningful work. When a pothos is placed thoughtfully near a desk, it acts as a natural stabilizer, absorbing excess electromagnetic energy and smoothing the key turbulence that otherwise sharpens into distraction, fatigue, or mental fog. Its continuous, steady growth pattern reminds the space to prioritize slow, sustainable progress rather than frenetic, anxious bursts of effort followed by burnout. Positioning matters tremendously. The pothos should ideally be placed to the left side of the desk when you are seated, aligning with the green dragon side in traditional Feng Shui, which supports vitality, creative flow, and career expansion. If the left side is not feasible, directly behind the monitor or to the far back left corner, the wealth corner of the desk, are excellent alternatives. Avoid placing the pothos too close to wires, where it could become physically entangled or neglected, or directly in front of heavy paperwork piles, where its energy risks being buried under stagnant obligations. The pot you choose should echo the feeling you wish to cultivate: focus, prosperity, balance. Earth-toned ceramics or elegant dark woods work beautifully here, reinforcing grounding while still honoring upward growth. Bright metallic pots can be used sparingly if you are intentionally strengthening clarity and sharpness in thinking, but beware of creating too harsh a tone, especially if your work already demands high stress and rapid-fire decision-making. The goal is to balance sharpness with softness, precision with patience, drive with endurance. Consider the example of Luis, an independent graphic designer who, despite his immense talent, found himself creatively blocked and financially inconsistent for nearly a year. His desk was a chaotic battlefield: tangled chargers, a constant rotation of coffee cups, stacks of unfinished sketches, and proposal drafts. Following a Feng Shui review, he introduced a vibrant pothos in a deep green clay pot to his work area, placing it slightly to the left of his main drawing surface. Over the next few weeks, not only did he find himself focusing more naturally, but he also noticed an ease in generating new ideas and closing client deals. The pothos was not a magic wand, but it became a living embodiment of flow, patience, and sustainable energy, qualities that had been missing not from his talent, but from his environment. His work stabilized, income increased, and most importantly, his love for his craft rekindled without the constant background noise of internal resistance. The lesson is subtle but profound. Your desk is not a place for frantic energy to pile up unchecked. It is the field where your efforts gather and concentrate into results. A pothos teaches this field how to breathe, how to pace itself, how to hold energy steadily rather than burning it up prematurely. It whispers, through its steady, almost invisible growth: trust the process, feed your work, allow the cycle of planting, tending, and harvesting to unfold naturally. Maintenance rituals are also important: dusting the leaves weekly, rotating the pot gently every month to encourage even growth, and pruning dying vines as needed. Weave the practice of energy stewardship into your professional life. These small, intentional acts build an energetic momentum that expands beyond the plan itself, training your mind and habits toward consistency, attentiveness, and resilience. Qualities far more vital to long-term success than bursts of short-lived inspiration. Lighting plays a crucial role too. Ensure your pothos receives sufficient but not overwhelming light. A poorly lit pothos struggles, and so does the career it supports. Light symbolizes clarity, vision, and opportunity. Nourish the plant well, and you simultaneously nourish your ability to see opportunities clearly, act on them wisely, and sustain momentum over time. In this way, the pothos becomes not just a decorative addition, but a living collaborator, an organic co-creator of your professional destiny. It reminds you that building a career or a business is not about dramatic leaps. It's about the accumulation of small, steady, faithful actions taken day after day. It's about patience with the seasons of growth, trust in the unseen roots developing below the surface, and confidence that tending carefully to your field will, in time, yield harvests greater than anything rushed or forced. When you sit at your desk and see the pothos thriving beside you, when you touch its cool living leaves between work sessions, you are participating in a dialogue between human ambition and natural wisdom. You are reminded that success is not a conquest, but a cultivation. That wealth is not a random accident, but a natural result of spaces and minds trained to hold it with steady hands. That growth, both professional and personal, requires environments that honor both action and rest, both striving and surrender, both diligence and grace. Thus, the placement of a pothos on your desk is an act of intention far deeper than most realize. It is a silent but powerful declaration that you are not merely chasing outcomes. You are building a space where outcomes can find you, thrive with you, and stay with you. And that, perhaps, is the true secret to sustainable career success in a world addicted to speed, but starved for meaning. 5. Balcony or rooftop. The balcony or rooftop, often treated as peripheral or purely recreational spaces, hold an enormously potent energetic role in Feng Shui. They serve as the lungs of a home, the places where qi breathes most freely, where the tight, often compressed energy of the interior meets the vast moving currents of the external world. These spaces, open to skiftoi, light, wind, and shifting elemental forces, act as natural gateways, points of exchange between the private energetic ecosystem of the household and the greater river of universal energy outside. To neglect a balcony or rooftop is to choke one of the primary breathing points of your living space. To nurture it consciously is to keep your home's energy field supple, fresh, and receptive to fortune in all its forms. A pothos plant, placed thoughtfully in these semi-open spaces, becomes more than an aesthetic touch. It becomes a living guardian, a silent but potent attractor of flowing, vibrant qi. Its vines, cascading naturally in soft, downward arcs or climbing gently upward when supported, echo the very movement that fortune prefers, neither too abrupt nor too sluggish, but rhythmic, responsive, alive. Where concrete, glass, and metal might harden the energy field, creating brittleness or blockage, the soft green of the pothos softens, stabilizes, and gently guides the energy into patterns of growth and receptivity. However, placement and care are once again everything. A pothos exposed to harsh, unfiltered sunlight all day may burn and crisp, transforming its intended symbolism of healthy expansion into a painful metaphor for exhaustion or overexposure. Therefore, when choosing a spot on the balcony or rooftop, prioritize places where the plant can receive bright, indirect light for most of the day, protected from violent midday rays either through natural shade, strategic positioning, or light-diffusing structures like bamboo screens or fabric awnings. If the balcony faces strong prevailing winds, which can create turbulent, scattered qi, position the pothos where it can act as a gentle windbreak, softening the chaotic currents and encouraging a more harmonious inflow of energy. The container should harmonize with the surrounding elements. Natural materials like unglazed terracotta, warm ceramics, or wooden planters strengthen the connection between plant and earth, grounding the floating nature of balcony energy and providing a stable, energetic platform for the plant to anchor its influence. In high balconies or rooftops where metal energy dominates because of altitude and exposure, weaving in pots with green, brown, or gold hues can help balance the wood element the pothos brings, ensuring that the space invites not only energy, but the right kind of energy: nourishing, steady, uplifting. An illustrative example comes from a small urban family living in a high-rise apartment in Singapore. Their home was clean, modern, well-appointed, yet despite their efforts, they reported a persistent feeling of emotional dryness and a curious pattern of missed financial opportunities, promising deals slipping away at the last moment, collaborative efforts that fizzled without explanation. Upon examination, it became clear that their sleek, minimalist balcony, though visually stunning, was energetically barren. Concrete floor, glass railings, a scattering of metal furniture, and not a single living plant. They were advised to introduce several hardy, air-purifying plants, including a pothos, positioned against the far left side of the balcony, the wealth-enhancing side, in a cluster with other gentle, rounded leaf companions. Within 3 months, they reported not only a noticeable uplift in mood and relational warmth, but also a string of small but meaningful financial wins: contracts approved, bonuses awarded, investments returning better than expected. They described the shift as a softening, a readiness they hadn't felt before, as if their home itself had started whispering invitations rather than holding its breath. The deeper energetic truth illuminated by this story is simple. Life moves toward vitality. Fortune is not a reward handed to the worthy, it is a river that seeks open channels. Your balcony or rooftop, when energized thoughtfully, becomes one of those channels, extending an energetic bridge between your intentions and the broader opportunities flowing through the world around you. It's important to weave in simple, sustainable care rituals. Check your balcony pothos weekly. Trim any browning leaves promptly, not just for aesthetic reasons, but to prevent stagnation and energetic backflow. Water mindfully, respecting the plant's need for balance, Not swampy soil, not parched roots. Consider placing a smooth river stone or a small piece of amethyst in the planter's base if the balcony energy feels sharp or overly active. These natural elements help stabilize and refine the energy stream flowing into your home. Occasionally rotate the pot by a quarter turn, inviting even, balanced growth and symbolically encouraging well-rounded, harmonious expansion in your external life as well. Lighting rituals can be powerful too. In early morning, open the balcony door or window to allow fresh qi to spill into the house. As the light brushes the leaves of the pothos and fills your interior spaces, imagine abundance, clarity, and vitality flowing in with it. These moments don't have to be formal ceremonies. Their power lies in the consistency of attention, in the silent recognition that the outer world and your inner world are always in dialogue. Above all, understand that in Feng Shui, as in life, openness alone is not enough. Openness must be tempered with readiness, invitation, and care. A bare balcony is like an empty hand, a missed opportunity. A thoughtfully energized balcony, adorned with a living ambassador like the pothos, becomes a hand extended not in desperation but in confident welcome. It says, quietly but unmistakably, I am prepared to receive. I am prepared to grow. I honor the life that seeks to find me. When you stand on your balcony or rooftop, take a moment to feel the currents moving around you. Are they wild and scattered or soft and directed? Does the space feel like a gateway, a breathing point where blessings can find their way in, or a forgotten corner where potential drifts by untethered? Let the presence of your pothos answer that question daily. Let it guide the invisible streams of fortune back toward your home, your life, your unfolding future. Because in the end, Feng Shui is not about superstition or ritual for its own sake. It is about remembering what life already knows, that growth requires space, that fortune follows vitality, and that sometimes the simplest act of placing one healthy plant in the right spot can shift not just the energy of a room, but the entire trajectory of a life. The 3 mistakes to avoid with your pothos placement. 1. In the kitchen often bustling with the daily rhythms of nourishment and preparation, is a powerful energetic zone in any home. But it is also one of the most complex fields to balance in Feng Shui terms. Here, the elements of fire and water meet in perpetual negotiation, each claiming their essential place. Fire through the stove, the oven, the act of cooking itself. Water through the sink, the faucet, the constant cleaning and rinsing that support the cycle of nourishment. This natural but tense elemental opposition creates a kind of dynamic turbulence, a constant back and forth of energies that are not easily harmonized without thoughtful design. Introducing a pothos plant, a living embodiment of the wood element, into this already contested zone may seem harmless at first glance, but energetically, it risks becoming a casualty of the elemental battle already underway. In the 5-element theory, wood is traditionally nourished by water and weakened by fire. In a chaotic kitchen setting, especially in layouts where the sink and stove are close together, a pothos is metaphorically pulled apart, overfed by water on one side, scorched by fire on the other, resulting in a confused, stressed, and ultimately struggling plant. And when the plant struggles, it mirrors a broader message, that the flow of prosperity, health, and emotional harmony linked to this vital heart of the home is also under strain. One common mistake people make is placing a pothos near the stove or in between the sink and the stove, thinking it will add freshness or beauty to a functional space. But energetically, the plant becomes a symbol of conflict. Caught in a tug of war, it cannot win. Over time, this misplacement can subtly erode the feeling of stability in the household. Financial matters may become more volatile. Unexpected expenses, difficulties saving, feeling like money slips away faster than it should. Emotional dynamics, too, may grow more reactive or brittle, with small disagreements flaring up more easily than they might otherwise. The home starts to reflect the chaos that the pothos, trapped and struggling to mediate between clashing forces, is quietly absorbing. A more aligned choice would be to honor the kitchen's existing fire and water conversation without forcing wood into an unstable intermediary position. If you deeply wish to incorporate a pothos into kitchen decor, It should be placed well away from the core conflict zones, perhaps on a distant countertop, near a window where fresh air can buffer the turbulence, or hanging lightly at the periphery where it can still offer its life-enhancing qualities without becoming energetically sacrificed. Even better, reserve the pothos for areas of the home where it can truly thrive. Entrances, living rooms, workspaces, balconies, places where its energy is reinforced rather than eroded. An illustrative example comes from the story of Sophia, a young entrepreneur who loved filling every corner of her apartment with green life. Proud of her indoor jungle, she positioned a particularly beautiful pothos right between her kitchen sink and stove, believing it added a needed softness to the hard, angular lines of the cabinetry. At first, the plant seemed fine, but within 2 months, she noticed the leaves yellowing despite careful watering and good light. Simultaneously, her new business, which had started promisingly, hit strange snags, delayed payments, miscommunications, minor but relentless frustrations. It wasn't until a Feng Shui consultation revealed the deeper conflict that she understood. Her prosperity energy was being symbolically pulled apart, just like her pothos. After moving the plant to her living room's wealth corner and replacing it with a simple, fire-harmonizing object like a red ceramic bowl, both the plant and her business vitality rebounded. The lesson embedded in her experience was not punitive, but educational. Environment matters, placement matters, and life responds to the fields we create, even when we are unaware we are creating them. Thus, the deeper principle emerges. Respect the elemental logic of your home. Understand that while plants offer tremendous energetic support, they also deserve environments that respect their nature. A pothos thrives where it can anchor gently into spaces that support growth, softness, and patience, not spaces where it must constantly defend its vitality against overwhelming elemental crosscurrents. When you honor this relationship, when you place your pothos where it can breathe freely and model resilient, upward-reaching life, you do more than decorate a space, you empower it. You allow the energy of your home to express clarity instead of confusion, steadiness instead of tension, abundance instead of depletion. Every time you walk through your kitchen, glance at the energy flow around your sink, your stove, your storage. Ask yourself, does this feel like a conversation or a conflict? Is the life force here being built up or worn thin by the endless clash of opposites? If it's the latter, let your pothos find another home, and let your kitchen reclaim its identity not as a battleground but as a carefully negotiated peace, one where nourishment, warmth, and support rise together without undermining each other. In Feng Shui, as in life, not every placement that looks charming is beneficial. The art lies not in how beautifully things seem to fit at first glance, but in how fully they participate in the deeper, unseen flows that sustain prosperity, health, and peace over the long arc of time. 2. In the bedroom, among all the spaces within a home, the bedroom holds a unique and sacred position. It is not merely a place for sleep. It is the cradle of restoration, intimacy, emotional unwinding, and the quiet renewal of the body's deeper systems. In Feng Shui, the bedroom is the most yin space in the home, the domain of stillness, introspection, softness, and healing. Everything placed within it must honor and amplify this quality. It must protect the delicate currents of peace that allow not only restful sleep, but also emotional resilience, clear dreaming, and the quiet mending of the soul. When the wrong elements are introduced, especially elements that carry strong, active, upward-moving chi, the subtle architecture of restoration is disturbed, and over time, both the visible and invisible layers of well-being suffer. This is why, despite their many virtues elsewhere, pothos plants are not ideal companions for the bedroom environment in Nepal. Pothos embody the essence of the wood element, dynamic, striving, constantly reaching upward toward the light, pushing against gravity, seeking expansion and movement. Their energy is alive, pulsing, vibrant. This energy is a tremendous gift when harnessed in spaces designed for growth, communication, wealth, or creativity. But in the bedroom, it introduces a subtle yet persistent undercurrent of restlessness. Instead of encouraging the body to sink deeply into restorative stillness, a thriving pothos vibrates with a call to awaken, to stretch, to move, to do. Over time, even if the plant is outwardly healthy, its energetic mismatch with the room's intended yin quality can manifest as difficulty falling asleep, restless dreams, lighter and less restorative sleep cycles, and an underlying sense of emotional unease that is difficult to trace back to any single cause. Many people are initially drawn to the idea of adding plants to the bedroom, believing that greenery inherently calms and purifies a space. While this is partially true, some plants can indeed gently enhance a restful environment. One must be extremely selective. Plants with slow, inward-moving energy profiles, such as snake plants or peace lilies, can harmonize with the bedroom's needs if positioned carefully. But pothos, with their vigorous outward growth patterns and high respiratory activity, belong to more active, yang spaces. Their energy disrupts rather than supports the quiet depth the bedroom craves. The story of Daniel and Claire, a young couple who both worked high-pressure jobs, illustrates this subtle but powerful principle. Seeking to create a serene, restorative sanctuary, they filled their master bedroom with lush plants, including a large, cascading pothos placed prominently near their bed. They loved the way it looked, fresh, live, vibrant. Yet within a few months, both began to notice shifts: lighter, broken sleep, occasional anxiety upon waking, a curious difficulty in maintaining emotional closeness during their evening hours together. Their stress, they assumed, was simply due to work. But when they consulted a Feng Shui practitioner, it became clear that their bedroom had become energetically discordant. The pothos, though thriving physically, was energetically calling the room into subtle motion at all hours, keeping their bodies and subconscious minds slightly activated, slightly defensive, slightly restless. Upon relocating the pothos to their home office and replacing it with a small, grounded piece of rose quartz in a slower energy plant, their sleep and emotional connection both improved dramatically over several weeks. It was not about eliminating life from their space. It was about matching the right kind of life force to the purpose of the room. The deeper Feng Shui lesson here is profound. Not all life force is interchangeable. Vitality, like music, must match the space that it fills. A symphony energizes a concert hall, but overwhelms a meditation room. A pothos energizes a living room or entrance, but unsettles a bedroom. True mastery lies not in seeking maximum energy everywhere, but in cultivating the right kind of energy in the right place at the right time. If you must have greenery in your bedroom for aesthetic or air-purifying reasons, opt for plants with a slow, inward yin quality. Choose species that grow compactly rather than sprawling outward, that breathe gently rather than vibrantly. Limit the number of plants to no more than 2 and position them respectfully, well away from the head of the bed, and preferably in soft corners where their energy can reinforce rather than dominate the flow of qi. Keep pots low to the ground or at bedside level, avoiding anything overhead that could create an oppressive energetic field above the resting body. In all cases, remember, in the bedroom, less is more. Stillness, openness, and the unpressured spaciousness to sink deeply into self are the true luxuries here. Allow your bedroom to become what it longs to be: a harbor, a retreat, a space where energy is not demanded but quietly restored. Let the qi here fall soft and deep, like snow on a silent field, accumulating the power you will draw from when you rise to meet the demands of the waking world. Thus, when it comes to your pothos, the kindest thing you can do for yourself, for your sleep, for your spirit, is to honor its vibrant, striving nature by giving it a home where movement, growth, and energy are blessings rather than burdens. Let your bedroom remain a garden of stillness. Let your pothos thrive elsewhere, whereas living momentum becomes a partner to your outward efforts rather than a rival to your inward peace. 3. Hidden in hallways or behind furniture. In the architecture of energy, hallways are the arteries of the home, the vital channels through which qi moves, carrying vitality, clarity, and abundance from one space to another. Hallways must breathe. They must pulse with subtle life, guiding energy gently but firmly through the structure, preventing stagnation, blockages, or sharp interruptions. When these passageways are compromised, either through clutter, poor lighting, or thoughtless placement of objects that obstruct flow, the entire energetic system of the home begins to suffer. Rooms that should feel interconnected begin to feel isolated. Spaces that should refresh and renew begin to feel heavy, inert, or subtly oppressive. In this delicate ecosystem, the placement of a living symbol, such as a pothos plant, is not a trivial matter. It is a pivotal choice that determines whether the hallway continues to serve as a lively channel or becomes a suffocated corridor where opportunity, health, and emotional well-being quietly slow and falter. When a pothos is hidden, tucked behind bulky furniture, squeezed between low shelves, crammed into corners that the light barely reaches, it cannot fulfill its role as a transmitter of life force. Its very nature, designed for open air, gentle movement, the visible reach of green tendrils toward the light, is betrayed. The plant may survive for a while in such conditions, but energetically it withers long before the first yellowing leaf appears. A hidden pothos sends a silent message to the chi moving through your home. Growth is not welcome here. Life must fight for space. Beauty and opportunity must remain unseen, uncelebrated, diminished. Over time, this quiet, energetic pattern echoes outward into other domains of life. Ambitions that stall before taking full form. Conversations that feel strained or incomplete. Projects that somehow always fall short of their promise. Financial luck that arrives but never seems to stay. This phenomenon is not merely symbolic. Plants, by their very nature, breathe. They engage in constant energetic exchange with their environment, transforming carbon dioxide into oxygen, filtering and softening the air, subtly adjusting the electromagnetic fields around them. When a plant is hidden, its capacity to breathe, both literally and energetically, is suppressed. And if the plant cannot breathe, neither can the chi around it. Stale pockets of energy form, vital circulation weakens. Even if every other aspect of the home is designed beautifully, these hidden suffocations quietly erode the vitality of the whole. The story of Marcus, a software engineer living in a sleek, modern apartment, offers a vivid illustration of this principle. Proud of his minimalist design aesthetic, he placed a pothos behind a large sectional sofa in a hallway alcove, believing it would add a touch of nature without disturbing the clean lines of the space. He rarely looked at the plant once it was placed, out of sight, out of mind. Over the next year, Marcus noticed a curious pattern. Despite long hours and considerable skill, his projects often languished just before completion. Promotions he was promised stalled without explanation. His social connections, once vibrant, grew cooler, marked by miscommunications and missed opportunities. A Feng Shui consultation revealed the problem instantly. The hidden pothos, trapped behind furniture, symbolized blocked circulation, unseen potential, choked vitality. The prescription was simple but profound. Bring the plant into the light, place it where its growth could be seen, celebrated, supported. Within months of moving the pothos to an open shelf near a sunlit window at the hallway's curve, Marcus reported not only a surge of renewed creativity and motivation, but also tangible career breakthroughs that had previously eluded him. The change was not magic, it was energetic logic manifesting through intentional design. The practical takeaway is clear. If you choose to invite a living symbol like a pothos into your home, honor its presence. Place it where it can breathe, grow, and participate visibly in the life of the household. Ideal hallway placements include open corners where the vines can cascade lightly without blocking movement, ledges or narrow tables where the plant can be elevated slightly into the line of sight, or wall-mounted planters that allow greenery to trail softly downward without impeding passage. The key is balance. The plant should soften the flow without obstructing it, adding life without cluttering the artery. Attention to maintenance is equally vital. A pothos in a hallway should be dusted regularly, rotated gently to encourage even growth, and pruned thoughtfully to prevent overgrowth that could encroach on the walking path. Lighting should be sufficient to support the plant's vitality without blasting it with harsh glare. Natural light is ideal, but if unavailable, a full-spectrum grow light placed discreetly can provide the necessary support without compromising the aesthetic of the hallway. Watering should be moderate, neither too thirsty nor too indulgent, reflecting the principle that life force, like wealth, health, and emotional prosperity, thrives not through extremes but through steady, attentive care. From a deeper energetic perspective, a well-placed pothos in a hallway acts as a living guide for the chi of the home. It catches the subtle breezes of movement, interprets them into a language of growth, resilience, and opportunity. It says, through every shimmering leaf and reaching tendril, this way, flow here, expand here. It invites the home's energy to stay vital, to stay moving, to stay open to the possibilities that life continually offers, but that only the prepared, the attuned, the consciously tended spaces can receive fully. Thus, the lesson is simple yet profound. Do not hide your life force. Do not tuck it behind convenience or aesthetic fear. Celebrate it, give it light, space, breath, attention. In doing so, you teach not just your home, but your entire life to grow visibly, healthily, abundantly. When you next walk through your hallways, look not just with your eyes, but with your inner sense. Does the passage feel alive, inviting, softly drawing you forward? Or does it feel constrained, pinched, breathless? Let your pothos answer. Let it guide the chi back into graceful, continuous motion. Let it remind you that in Feng Shui, as in all things, life flourishes where it is seen, supported, and allowed to fully breathe. Sometimes we search endlessly for the grand solutions, the perfect object, the ideal arrangement, the magical symbol that promises to unlock prosperity, peace, or purpose. But the quiet truth revealed through the wisdom of Feng Shui and the lived rhythm of nature itself is far simpler. Life grows where attention flows. Energy follows care. Spaces respond not to price tags or prestige, but to sincerity. It's not about having the biggest pothos plant or the most ornate decor or the trendiest arrangements. It's about whether you have invited life into your space with genuine thoughtfulness, with a whisper of commitment, with the quiet promise, I see you, I will tend to you, I will allow you to thrive here. Look around your home, not with the critical eye of judgment, but with the soft gaze of possibility. Where does life feel thin? Where have you, without realizing it, allowed energy to grow dusty, stagnant, or strained? It doesn't require a renovation, a fortune, or a complete upheaval. It begins with one gesture, one space, one invitation. Choose one place where life is missing, one forgotten shelf, one barren corner, one empty stretch of hallway, and let something grow there. Not because you are fixing something broken, but because you are reawakening a conversation between your home and your future, between who you are today and who you are becoming. Perhaps it will be a pothos reaching gently toward the morning light. Perhaps it will be something else entirely, a bowl of fresh fruit, a vase of water welcoming sunlight, a small sacred object that reminds you, energy is alive here. You are alive here. And if something in this video offered you a new way of seeing your surroundings, if it nudged your awareness even slightly toward a deeper intimacy with your own space, I would be truly honored to hear your experience. Please share your reflections in the comments. Your stories nourish this journey not only for yourself, but for everyone quietly walking alongside you. And if you would like to continue unfolding this path of energy, wisdom, and grounded transformation together, I warmly invite you to subscribe to New Day Mindfulness. Every like, every share, every voice joining this growing circle helps me gently move toward our first 1,000 followers. A milestone not for numbers alone, but for the living proof that when we tend carefully to what matters, beautiful things grow. Thank you for being here. Thank you for tending to your space, your life, your unseen gardens of possibility. May your home breathe more freely, may your days open more brightly, and may your future flow to meet you like sunlight meeting the first new leaf.